Doesn't like that. Somebody's asked a question, folks, and I will answer the question because it was important. The issues with the Exchange last week, the Exchange demonstration we were doing last week, were associated with I ran out of space on the C drive because of a stupid mistake I'd made earlier on in the day. It has been, I did resolve it. I did make a video, a Camtasia Captivate session. I was given the list of participants from last week. I'll put it up on an FTP site and you can get it from there. Okay? All right. All other questions, folks, I'll ask that you keep them till later on from this point forward. Folks, what I've got here is actually it's a 2012 R2 box. I've done an install. It's just in a work group at the moment, folks. It's purely and simply about concepts is what we're trying to talk about. We'll be going to administrative tools, looking for computer management. I can just show it to you from ShadowProtect's perspective, but it helps if you see the underlying structure as well. About the way I build this server, and it's all about what's part and parcel of SQL and what you should be doing to deal with it, okay? Sorry, folks, I'm just going to make sure I turn off the backup job that I have for my G drive at the moment, just to ensure that I get everything I need here. It's amazing, isn't it? You test a thing 2 minutes ago and you got everything you need, and then all of a sudden it just decides it's not going to work. That's cool. It will come up in 2 secs, folks. In the meantime, let me move on. This laptop is basically the same way, except I've done one thing wrong on my laptop. I have a full SQL instance, and that's why at the appropriate time this one will pop open and we will use it. Okay? Looks like it's opening up now, but I'll go back to mine. Give it another half a second, see if it wants to wake up. Okay, it won't. That's cool. I'm talking about Microsoft SQL here first. That's basically what this is about, but I will cover a few other points here, folks, that I think are important for you to take into account. Last couple of days I've been asking questions about some other styles of SQL servers, and I intend to talk about them as well. But let's deal with Microsoft. Okay, I am using a 2012 64-bit version of SQL, and I did a custom install of my SQL server for a particular reason. You know, C drive's normally not the quickest place in the wide world. You don't want to store any data there, but I'd also do a custom install for another reason. And this is heading down the lines of some best practices for you from, you know, Microsoft's perspective. ShadowProtect likes it that way too, so it's all about trying to back things up correctly, yes? Now, the standard discussion I have with a lot of people, this is for my Watchdog instance, what it's actually used for is irrelevant, but these databases from here down are purely and simply my production databases. Okay? I would like to take the 2 minutes and describe what these other databases do so that you understand where I'm coming from when this one here finally decides to wake up and play the game with us. Okay? We'll keep going back. First one is the master database, folks. These top databases are system databases. And I just very briefly like to discuss what the hell they are. And it's purely and simply so you have an understanding. Why should they not be on the C drive? Well, they're your production databases, folks. These ones here are system ones, but it's part of the production system. So what does the master database do? In a nutshell, without diving into the deep parts of what that database does, purely and simply the master database is the gatekeeper. You hand it some credentials and it says, yes, you can get to that production database, or no, you can't. Okay? It's the gatekeeper, and it gives you the access key based on your credentials. You could be a database owner or just a database user. It's a gatekeeper. How hard does it work? Not very hard. Okay? The next one is the model database. That particular database does diddly squat, folks. It doesn't do a damn thing until the day you go right click, let's create a new database, and it uses the model as a model. That's all. The next one down can get complex and complicated, but in a nutshell, the MSDB database is the security footprint for the SQL instance. Okay? It was introduced in 2005 to assist in securing your databases. So it says, I will listen on named pipes on this particular IP address, or I will listen on this particular port on this IP address. It won't listen on everything. It just says, that's what I will listen on. And it's the security footprint, basically, of the databases, of all databases, of the instance itself. It does a few other bits and pieces, but in a nutshell, that's what it does. Okay. Does it work very hard? No. It works a little bit, but it's not. It's not killing itself with sort of effort. It's not intended to. This is the one I want to deeply discuss. Okay. Now, I started my laptop up, and I'm based on Queensland time, even though I'm sitting in Melbourne today. That database was created at 8:55 this morning. Why was that? See all the other timestamps on the other databases? This is the temporary database, folks. Believe it or not, that is the hardest working database on your system. If you have any of the production databases in full recovery mode, that database works like no tomorrow. And it is the one that you should never back up because it's useless. The moment you restart the SQL instance and or the SQL server, that database is destroyed and recreated from scratch. So whatever was sitting in it is of no use to you. Now this instance of mine, the way I've built this particular one, I've left them here. They should not normally be left in this particular volume, the F drive that I've got. I should stick them on a volume that I back up once and never again, because you can't use the backups of these two files. You can't even back them up. There's no point, because as soon as you restart, it just disappears. Now, why is these two so important? Because what a lot of people don't realise, folks, and they leave them on their C drive, by the way, which is already flat out. The point that a lot of people don't realise, good database administrators know about it and shift them. It is the most important, because when you do a query, where does it get stored? in the temporary database. It's an ad hoc sparse file style database. While it's running, SQL knows what's where and when. Okay, if you try to put a temporary database back from, a couple of weeks ago, it's just not going to go. It just says, no, when we restart, we're going to blow it away. Okay, if you do a bulk insert, or if I've got 15 people committing, purchase orders into a database, or, shipping out 15 wheelbarrows or something, if the SQL server thinks it's a little slow, it doesn't matter. It will always shove it into the temporary database, and then SQL, in its processes, will then copy that information out of the temporary database into the log file, and then start the atomic transaction process to commit to the database. Again, I'm saying this for one particular reason, and hopefully this little box is now starting to play the game for us, which it is. Okay. I'll continue down here. Yes, I think I'll continue down here. Those two databases, that database and its log file, folks, should be stored on a completely separate volume with something else that never, ever, ever gets backed up continually. You back it up once for system integrity purposes and never back it up again. There's no point. It's garbage data. Okay. Let's see if this girl's playing the game. Folks, you can see here that I built this server in a particular way as a way of demonstrating how the perfect SQL server should be built. Okay? So what I've got here is a C drive, which should be a SAS mirror, okay? And it's purely and simply for my OS and my SQL binaries. I then go down to the E drive, and that's where I store my SQL databases, okay? And there you go. There are my system databases, but my production databases. Because what I've done in the ideal world, and it should be done this way, is shifted my log files for my database to another RAID 10. I did say this was supposedly a perfect log. Money was no object. We've got 3 arrays so far. Okay. And there's my log files. What I've also got is a single spindle for my page file. And there is nothing else on there except my Windows temporary directories, which is a personal thing that I do. My Windows temporary directories are stored on there. Why do I want to back up Windows temporary files? I don't know. And there's my fixed size page file for the 16 gig of memory or whatever it is I've given this particular machine. It's a fixed size page file. I back that up once and once only. And then down here I've got that other mirror. Okay, some people prefer to make it a RAID 10 as well because they're looking for the quickest disk they can find for what? The temporary database. Okay? All right, we've now discussed the way we built the server. The one thing we haven't discussed is VSS backups of SQL, folks. And I want you to think about the provider. Our provider calls VSS. VSS calls the SQL writer to create, and if you could imagine, folks, a cup in kernel memory, in actual memory of the machine, that is what's called a SQL VDI. Okay? This SQL VDI basically says, as part of the writer's function, if you're taking anything from the temporary database and putting in a log file, stop and do no more. If you are committing something from the data, a log file to the database, stop and do no more. Basically, it makes the entire file system associated with SQL read-only flush to disk. This cup, if you could imagine this cup as my VDI. Just hold up your hand as if it was like a little bowl. That bowl is able to read all and every sector associated with those files, and what the VDI does is say to anybody that's interrogating SQL, you know, committing, looking for, doing whatever they may be doing, what it says is, yes, here's the data, you can read it, and if they do any changes, the VDI is intended to hold those changes and reflect those changes while the actual files on disk are frozen. Okay? Frozen is not a word I like, but basically they're read-only. Okay, so the SQL VDI function must work on Microsoft SQL very, very well. Okay? Now, once the VDI is in place, it basically, the writer then goes to the VSS and says, we're ready to snapshot. The VSS tells the provider, which is our ShadowProtect, we're ready to back up. All that flush processes, we got that from VDIF, we create the snapshot, we then do the backup. But as soon as we've got the snapshot, we actually say to SQL, we've got the snapshot, please hold that SQL VDI for the moment. Once the backup is complete, we then tell VSS, VSS tells the SQL writer, and the SQL writer then basically takes the writes that everybody else thought happened and actually physically writes them to disk. Okay? It is important that VSS never ever gets damaged. It's important that the SQL VDI structure works correctly. Now, here is a little bit of information you may find useful. No, it is critical, I'm sorry. The SQL maintenance plans and our provider are both competing potentially. If you've got a DBA doing his thing and the backup operator doing his thing, we potentially got two providers talking to VSS. VSS does not like that. You must stop doing that. What most people will now do, and I did this for a series of 74 servers in Sydney, and obviously people need, DBAs in particular, need to test it, but SQL is the only animal that doesn't follow the VSS standard in so much that the writer won't truncate transaction log files. So you must have a maintenance plan in place, the normal maintenance plan to do integrity checks, recreate indexes, reorganize and shrink sort of stuff. Sure, still do them once a week at 1 o'clock in the morning, a couple of minutes past 1 in the morning. But every day, kick off a little maintenance plan that does something else. And all it does at 10 minutes past midnight or 10 minutes past 1 or 15 minutes past 1 in the morning, what it does is a transaction log backup of all full recovery mode databases. Why do we do this? Because that's the only way to truncate those log files for the production databases. Remember, system, model, MSDB data, and your current production databases. To truncate those logs, you need a maintenance plan to do it. But you do it once and once only. And then for the rest of the day, you use ShadowProtect. I was speaking with a particular DBA admin, and he, we went through these discussions for a couple of hours and sorted it out. He understood where I was coming from. He then explained what he wanted, and that's basically what we came up with, was once a day a SQL maintenance plan to back up transaction logs only, not databases, the log files, because we want the truncation. Once we did that, he just did ShadowProtect backups for the rest of the day. He actually told me that he found it to be 10% to 15% quicker and more efficient with less downtime in terms of the SQL VDI than he was doing with maintenance plans, so nobody even knew what the hell was going on. Okay, and his restore process was simplified dramatically because he didn't have to keep going looking for maintenance plan BAK files. He just simply mounted up the last backup or the backup before some corruption happened, copied out the MDF, the LDF, and copied them back across. Stop the instance, delete 2 files, whack in the 2 files, and he made sure his databases didn't get over, huge sizes. He separated them out a little bit to ensure performance, because large databases get pretty hard to read. Okay, so he kept his sizes quite small. Most of his databases would not get anywhere near about 14 to 20 gig. He'd just keep breaking them down. On the same sets of spindles, but he just broke them down so that that whole VSS thing had a chance to do its job. Okay, but where did he do those backups to? See this H drive here? He does them into this particular folder, and again, I haven't got any in there at the moment, but it's set up to do them. Again, this H drive, folks, we back it up once and once only. So, how many backup jobs do I need to back up this server, folks? This is the fundamental, crucial question. If I go to ShadowProtect, we could create those jobs, because you can see there's my C drive, there's my databases, there's my logs, page, file, and temp. The way I would do it, folks, is basically like this. Just going to lay the phone down on the desk for a moment, folks, so I can use that hand for a minute. Okay? I'm going to back up, because of the way I've built my server, and I'm looking for least impact here. I'm backing up the C drive in isolation. It is going to this particular location, which I pre-created. I'm going to use continuous incrementals. And for the sake of this discussion, folks, I'm going to start these backups at 4:01. In the morning, and I'm going to go through to 11:01 at night, and my C drive every hour, yeah, I'm comfortable with that, 20 backups a day. You would do the normal standard compression, you would enter the password protection, and you name your job, and I just simply go, so that everybody else knows exactly what I've done. C drive, pick the normal options you would want in your advanced tab, okay, and go next. Tick the box and go execute. Yes? So I'm going to do that one, and I'm just going to pause them, folks. You kick off the base at a night time, obviously, and then just let it do its job for the rest of the time. This next job, however, folks, is a little interesting because it's got to include the database and log files. So this one will be the E and the F. Okay? Now, going to the same place, I'm not going to change those. I'm going to go next. Okay, again, we're going to use continuous incrementals. And if I can remember correctly, we went 4:01. So this one will be well, let's make them 5 minutes apart. And we went 11:06. And these ones I am going to back up every 30 minutes. Yes? 39 of them a day from 4 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. 5 minutes after the C drive one, I'm going to go next. Usual thing again, here, God, if I can remember, E plus the F, E plus the F drives. I'm going to go to the Advanced tab. Okay? Because I've got 2 separate RAID controllers with 2 RAID 10s for the databases and the logs, I can tick this box that says Enable Concurrent Task Execution because I'm looking for the quickest backup that I can get. So what I do, I'm snapping them both at the same time. So why would I not back them up at the same time? Because I've got 2 separate arrays. If it's the same physical disk but different volumes, I would not do this. But because I've got 2 arrays, this server money wasn't an object. So because I've got two separate RAID controllers, I can do this. I can go OK, next, okay, and go execute now, obviously. But that particular drive, I will pause it as well. Okay, that's for my C's. I've done my E and my F. What about these other two volumes? I am going to back them up, but I'm going to back them up once. And I will never back them up again because it's got stuff in there that I can't or won't use. Okay? So my page file, why the hell would, don't you, when you back up a disk that's got a page file on it, doesn't it exclude the disk, the page file? Yes, it does, but I still want to back this G drive up for system integrity. If I have to restore it 6, 12 months down the track, I want to be able to put the G drive back. It's how long is it going to take to restore? Oh, about 3 seconds. But I back it up once. And the same with the H drive. I don't want the data in here, so I'm going to back it up once. And it's purely and simply for system integrity, for restores. So I've got those two jobs, so I'm going to whack those two volumes in the same job. Everything else is cool here. Again, I am only going to now do a full backup. And I'm going to go next. The same thing. Okay? And here I'm just going to simply go, I'm just going to call it the manual. Yes? And again, you know, it's entirely up to you here, folks, because it's only one backup. I don't really care what you pick on this. But I'm just going to go next. And it should execute now. I'm just going to untick that because I actually don't want it to do the backups. It just slows down our whole process for today, and I'm going to go finished. Okay? Creates the job, and I'm just going to pause it. Okay? It's a manual backup job. They're all scheduled. Now I've packed up this server in the correct manner. Agreed? Quick, smooth, efficient, took into account all the variables that I need to take into account. And if you have a look at it, okay, I need to continually back that up. I need to continually back these two up in the same job because they are, I want transactional integrity. They've got to be backed up in the same job. Whether they're done one after the other or concurrently depends on how the array system is set up. These two, back them up once and never again because they're for system integrity purposes. Okay. Just had a drink of water, sorry guys. Questions come up purely and simply around, well, how the heck do I back up other SQL instances? Okay? And I have to ask you the simple question here, folks. I have to ask this question. Are they DOS-based databases? That was an interesting discussion. Yeah. Are they DOS-based databases? What I mean by DOS-based, are they a really old single file looking or a bunch of files that are separate tables and data files? If that is the case, you cannot use traditional backup methods to back that up at the sector level. It will be quite possible, quite likely, that your backup will back up a corrupted system. And it could possibly even corrupt the databases. More likely will. You will, in those cases, if they are DOS-based style databases, we'll just quickly edit this particular job. What you would need to do, working, please, waiting, of course you're working. What you would need to do, folks, in those instances, the old Navision servers were based on a C-side database. You can back them up with ShadowProtect, but you've got to do one thing. Before you snapshot them, shut down the service. After you back them up, start the service. Now, you're not going to do that every 30 minutes because why bother? Your boss will shoot you. But make it very clear to the boss, to the owner, to the database administrator, we need to back this thing up and we need to back it up so that we can restore data with some integrity. That's what it's all about. So in those particular cases, I have one customer that has one of those. Actually, they have 3 of those in the Vision servers before Microsoft bought the product. Based on these Seaside DOS databases, and he does it at 6:30 in the morning. There's been a circular go out to everybody to ensure that at 12 o'clock they stop work, okay, for 3 to 5 minutes. He shuts down, and he does it again, of course, at 7 o'clock at night when there is nobody on the system. He shuts down the services before he snapshots it, because shutting that down, VSS, all the files get flushed to disk, and our snapshot driver picks up all of those flushes to disk and records them in the VDIF, which is where we get our snapshot from. Okay, but he says pre-snapshot, shut down, post-backup, start up. Perfect way to do it, but it's one of those things you got to do in the correct way. Yes? How about we talk about some of the other SQL instances, not Microsoft. Microsoft we've discussed, even an Express server. What about a Windows internal database? It is the same functionality. You get a lot less choices about shifting files around, but Microsoft we've covered. We picked the perfect world to show you the ins and outs of the damn thing, but what about other SQL instances? What about Oracle? Early versions of Oracle, Oracle 9, were true atomic databases, which means they didn't use the temporary stored database to any extent. It was purely and simply either in memory or it was in the log. Okay? Sometimes in those, and it was very, very rarely, sometimes in a backup of the early Oracle, the version 9 Oracles, what you missed in one backup you picked up in the next one, and the one at the end of the day was absolutely perfect. But most people could, 99.9% of the time, they could restore a Oracle database without any issues at all. There's a lot of other databases out there, folks, and the list goes on and on and on. One that came to my attention just recently was MySQL. And I've only ever had exposure to what I call full recovery mode MySQL instances. Apparently there's a version kicking around now that, and I've not seen it, so I really can't verify it, but I saw the output of one 2 days ago. It's a simple recovery mode SQL instance, MySQL. It needs to be treated as if it was a DOS database because it doesn't do true atomic transactions. Okay? So, based on that, folks, I've really covered most, if not all, of what I wanted to talk about. Sorry, this was a little bit slow, but hey, we were still able to use this. Of course, the 2 things I've done wrong with mine, the laptop instance, is these 2 databases. But because I only have 2 of these databases as full recovery mode, it hardly ever gets used. Then it's not highly utilized. You know, it might get 1 transaction every 15 minutes. You know, so it won't use the temporary database because it can keep up. The other thing is these backup directories. The backup files, I've left them here because they're generally not that big, but every day they get created. And yes, folks, look at the silly time I got them done. You know, I need seriously to change that. But generally my laptop's not on unless I'm in Brisbane at 1 o'clock in the morning. So it's one of those things, you know, you've got to do the best you can with what you got sometimes. Okay. All right, folks. I am going to now look through. Yes, we've got 3.5 dozen questions here, folks. Just bear with me. The Exchange one I've covered, I'm not going to cover that off. Question here about if we didn't make last week or the week before or the week before that, they are sitting, every one of these sessions is recorded, folks. I've given them to the people in Sydney. I simply asked the people in Sydney to just tidy them up a little bit by taking the question section out of the back end of it. They will be put up on YouTube, I believe, in the next week or two. Marketing people have that, so that's out of my hands. This particular one. Gentleman's asked a question here. With the concurrent tasks in advance option, I assume we should not do this if it's a virtual machine and the VHDs are on the same array. Absolutely, sir. Don't do it. It's if I've got a physical machine with two separate RAID controllers, it saves me some time. Okay? But you're correct in your assumption. You should not do this if it's a virtual machine and the VHDs are on the same RAID, which is basically what I've got here. Is they're all sitting on the same physical disk. This virtual machine's VDIs or VHDs or VMDKs are sitting on the same disk structure down here, and they're basically here. We'll go to the virtual machines that I have. I think this one is this box here, and yes, basically what you're saying is those VHDs, VHDXs, VMDKs, or in my case VDIs, you should not use that concurrent option if they're all sitting on the same physical disk down here. Yep, I agree. Perfect question. The next question was about concurrent task execution. Yes, absolutely. Normally what would happen, folks, is if I didn't tick that, what would happen is it would snap both drives. If I go back to here, what it would do is snap both of those drives, so I get a snapshot at the same split second. It writes the two files down to disk, then picks up the E drive first, does that backup, doesn't complete the backup. It basically has the file completed, but it won't delete the snapshot, and then it moves on to the F drive and does that one. And when it finishes, it then does the finalization of, finish done, snapshots were destroyed. Okay? Only ever use that option if you have more than one array. Do not use it if you have a single array. I threw it in there because this was a, hypothetically a perfect machine. Okay? Money was no object. I had basically 5 RAID controllers. Well, 4 RAID controllers and a JBOD for my page file. But you understand where I'm coming from. Okay. No. Folks, I'm going to read this question out. It's a common misperception, and I'm not really sure where it came from, but anyway. Concurrent task execution, when you have one. My understanding from years ago that basically you tick that if you wanted them all drives backed up in the same, at the exact same second, blah, blah. What I'm saying, folks, is if those two jobs, let's edit this job, seriously. And let's get this right. Okay? Let us assume, for the sake of the exercise, these two RAID 10s were sitting on the same RAID controller. What change would I do? I would untick that because they're on the same RAID controller. What does that then mean? The only thing it means is I won't back them up at the same time. But it says it will always snapshot them at the same time. That is the way ShadowProtect is designed to work. They're in the same job. I'll snap them at the same time. I will have 2 snapshot files that allow me to get consistency of data. Log file database, in this case, consistency of data is what we're concerned about. Therefore, I will snap them both at the same time, but I will then put the snapshot files down on disk as my files. I will then pick up the E drive and 90% complete that backup before I then start the F drive to reduce the load on the system. We're trying to prevent impact. The only time you use concurrent task execution is if you have two separate RAID controllers. Then I can back both of them up at the same time. Okay? They still snapshot exactly the same as they did before, but I have two drives backing up because I've got two RAID controllers. That's the only time concurrent task execution should come into it. Okay, let's move on. I hope that clarifies that question for everyone. Okay. Very interesting question was raised by this particular user, and I'm going to answer this question because it's one of those questions, how long's a piece of string? Very often when I install ShadowProtect or run SQL Diagnostics, it tells me my page file is too small. When I create page files, I do double the memory. Okay? With pure SQL servers, it's been fairly common over the years that a SQL server, best practice is take, let's just assume for the discussion, I have 12 gig of memory. Then I will create a page file that is 4 times the size of that as a fixed size. And that's a fairly standard, common theme with SQL boxes. Fixed size page files 4 times the size of physical memory. Everything else I go double. But SQL, I will always go 4 times. But there is a limit. With 64-bit systems in particular, which is very common, well, just about everybody uses a 64-bit system today. The moment you hit 64 gig, there is no point in 4 times the size for a fixed page file. No point. Twice the size, absolutely, but as soon as you hit 64 gig of memory for a SQL box, very seldom will it actually use the page file. It'll use every scrap of memory it can lay its hands on, but very seldom will it use the page file. So basically my answer to this is up to 64 on a pure SQL box, I will go 4 times. Anything else is always double and fixed sizes. As soon as I hit 64 gig of memory, which is not hard to hit these days, it's very easy to see server after server with more than that, there is no point in going any more than double. Okay? As a matter of fact, I see an awful lot of SQL boxes that have got 128 gig of memory. Guess how big the page file is? 128 gig. But it is still fixed size, not system managed. I hope that clarifies that situation. Excellent. Okay, folks. I think I'm finished for today's session, and I do hope that the audio system was clear enough for you today. My normal system just refused to allow me to speak, which probably would have been blissful for somebody, but not much good for this. So, at that point, folks, I am going to say thank you very, very much for your attendance. I certainly hope we've given you some food for thought, and I certainly hope that you start to understand why your systems, your SQL systems in particular, need to be thought about a lot more than the traditional black installs we've always done. So based on that, folks, I hope you got something out of it. Thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend. We will see you next Friday. Thank you. Bye.